You know, I've been sharing in my series about the life of Joseph, the life of Joseph. And Joseph is, his story is so classical, a story about the, oh my goodness, somehow my phone's picking up. Don't know how that happened. But as I was sharing, the life of Joseph shares to us a lot about the Jewish culture. The Jewish culture. One of my very first jobs here in Southern California, I had a couple of jobs, but one of my first ones was working at Kaiser Permanente. And my boss was a little, she was probably about, I'm going to guess, 10, 15 years older than me. Wonderful lady. Her name was Linda Wine. And she was my immediate boss. Jewish American. And so, you know, it was kind of fun. One of the things is when you start a new job, is you kind of get to know each other. Well, Linda was my direct supervisor, and we were in charge of the Los Angeles Medical Center at Kaiser Permanente, down at Sunset in Vermont. And in addition to working at the hospital, it was just kind of nice to get to know each other. And she was kind of curious because she had never worked with someone who was Chinese American. I had never worked with someone who was Jewish American. And as we got to know each other, we got to find out that we actually shared a lot in common. There's a lot, and I used to even joke about this much after I left Kaiser Permanente, because my life for me and Marina was so much about Chinese ministry. I would joke that the Chinese are the Jews of the East because of the commonality that we share. And as I got to know Linda, it just reinforced those common values, that we had this commonality about culture, about the food, about family, about tradition, about respect for elders, about the emphasis placed in education, and you know, the hard work ethic, right? And so much of that is shared cross-culturally, not just between the Chinese and Jewish culture, but many other cultures. And that's kind of the neat thing as you get to meet people of other cultures, is the things that you share in common. We're told in the story of Joseph that he was one of many brothers. He was one of how many? 12. 12 brothers. My goodness, right? And so, again, being Chinese American, I'm one of 5 brothers, right? So there's a commonality there. How many of you, let me just kind of raise your hand, that you're an only child? Any only child in the room? Well, Jacqueline, you got brothers. That doesn't count. Okay, you got brothers. But you kind of are, but no. How many of you are the oldest in your family? Raise your hand. The oldest, I see several hands. How many of you are the baby in the family? Raise your hand. I see several hands, right? How many of you have a younger siblings? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of you have older siblings? Raise your hand. So we have a nice mix here. One of my favorite books that I'm not going to talk about today, but it's called The Birth Order Book. It's written by Lehman. It's just a wonderful book about birth order and how that has a dynamic on your personality. Being the oldest, being the youngest, right? If there's gaps, you know, how that affects. And there's studies done, I've shared in the past about how many that are the oldest child end up being like an astronaut, super achieving, because of that extra responsibility placed on you when you're the oldest child, like watch over your little brothers and sisters, right? So it kind of ingrains this behavior or value that gets reinforced. I've shared with you how my mom was the oldest of 9. Oldest of 9. And she was the first one in her family to come from China to the United States. And I'm still fascinated about my parents' history. But, you know, being the big sister that she was very quiet and soft-spoken. She was very much like Jacqueline, very soft-spoken. But when she spoke, people listened because she was the big sister. And, you know, in the Chinese culture, you've heard me refer to, I'm number 4 son out of 5 brothers. And I used to think my mom and dad didn't know my name because I was always number 4. And they would talk about number 1 or number 2 or number 3 or number 5. And we were all referred to by numbers. And you know, it went on throughout our whole life. Like, how's number 1 doing? You know, talking to mom. How's number 4 doing? You know, there was this numbers. Well, my mom being one of 9, there's also an order to them. Mom was always number 1. That's how her brothers, her sisters, my cousins. My mom was the big auntie. She was number 1. She was the matriarch. But under my mom being number 1, you know how we just say aunts and uncles? Well, no. In Chinese culture, they're rank ordered. And it's very important that you're rank ordered. So number 1 is my mom. Number 2 is my auntie. And I refer to her as number 2 auntie. That she goes after my mom. And then there's a number 3 auntie. And then there's a break, and I have 2 uncles. And my 2 uncles are not just called uncle. There's called older uncle and younger uncle. There's a distinction, and that's how we refer to them, right? And then I have my younger aunties below that. That's number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they're all rank ordered. It's interesting to note this because, again, there's a reference to this in God's word in the story of Joseph. As we go back to the story of Joseph, again, he's one of 12 brothers. He's number 11. Number 11. And as you know the story of Joseph, he's sold off to slavery by his big brothers. I mean, at one point they wanted to kill him. Finally, the big brother intervenes and says, let's not kill him, let's throw him in the pit. And while he's in the pit, the other brothers decide, well, let's not kill him, let's just sell him off to slavery. So they sell off their brother because he was daddy's favorite and they were jealous. They sell him off to slavery. And at the age of 17, I think Jacqueline's what, 19? So you're 18. Just a year. Can you imagine having your big brother say, we're jealous because you're mommy and daddy's favorite, or mommy's favorite, or daddy's favorite. And we're going to sell you off to slavery. We're going to cash in on you. Well, that's what they did to Joseph. They sold him off. And so Joseph goes on this different life, and time passes. How much time passes? About 20-something years. During that time, a passage, Joseph goes on this journey. And you know, my message is titled Grace and Forgiveness. Because that's what happens when you have brothers and sisters, when you have relationships, right? Sometimes there's friction. And sometimes that friction is mild, sometimes it's more severe. Sometimes it gets really intense. And so much of life is learning to deal with that friction. And so, as the story goes, you know, just to fast forward a little bit, you know, Joseph becomes second in command of Egypt. God just blesses him beyond measure. And God speaks to Joseph and tells Joseph, right, through the interpreting Pharaoh's vision, that there's going to be 7 amazing years of plenty, and then there's going to be 7 years of famine. So fast forwarding all these years after Joseph is sold off to slavery, Joseph is now second in command in Egypt. And 20-something years has passed. His brothers now are middle-aged. I mean, they knew Joseph when he was 17 years old. 20-something years had passed. And so in Egypt, because of God's, blessing on Joseph and putting him second in command, Egypt is doing well during this time of hardship. They have food stored up. They have grain stored up. And they're like the only country that is doing well. All the surrounding countries, they're in year 2 of this famine, and there's no food. And so, these brothers and their family, their father Jacob, he says to the brothers, go to Egypt and buy some food. Use the money to bring back some grain. And so that's what happens. They go to Egypt. Joseph immediately recognizes them, but Joseph wants to test them and see, have they changed any? Are they still mad at me? Is my little brother Benjamin still alive? So there's a lot of thoughts in Joseph's mind. And so he tests them. And when they come to ask for the food, Joseph doesn't reveal who he is. He plays dumb. He pretends he doesn't speak Hebrew. He uses an interpreter. But he inquires about his little brother, inquires about his dad, right? And it brings us back to this testing period of, can I trust my brothers? I want to bring your attention to Genesis chapter 45, verses 1 to 5. And in this, kind of bring you up to speed, the brothers first visit there. Joseph gives them grain. But he says, you got to leave one of your brothers behind. And he's testing them. He's saying, I think you guys are spies. It's like, but he's playing a game. He knows that they're his brothers. They don't recognize him. And he's saying, I think you guys are spies. So I'm going to give you this grain, but I'm going to hold one of your brothers kind of like hostage. Because you got to bring back that little brother Benjamin that you tell me you have, that's with your father. You got to bring him back, come back, and then I'll release this one brother I'm holding hostage. Right? And so they come a second time, and they bring Benjamin. And as they bring Benjamin, again, Joseph testing them, right? I mean, he puts the money back in their sacks. He puts his personal silver cup, that's Joseph's personal cup, and he puts it in Benjamin's bag, sneaks it in there. And then as they're leaving, departing, he has his guard chase them down and saying, open up your bags, like that the silver cup is missing. We want to inspect your bags. And again, Joseph's testing them to see, are they repentant? How are they going to respond? And finally, Joseph, breaks down as we're in Genesis chapter 45, verse 1 to 5. Follow with me. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried, have everyone go out from me. So there was no man with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard of it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, please come closer to me. And they came closer, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God has sent me before you to preserve life. What an amazing story. His brothers are just in absolute shock. They're just stunned beyond belief. I mean, I can't imagine, right? They are just like speechless. And Joseph's making a commotion. And all the Egyptians there are like hearing the shouting and crying and emotion. And you know, again, just incredible. And his brothers, you got to think, they're a little scared. Like, first of all, that Joseph's alive. Second of all, that Joseph is, he's like second in command of all Egypt. Third, is Joseph going to kill us? Is he going to get us back, right? You know, so again, so much of our lives and interpersonal relationships are built on trust. You know, I mentioned when I worked with Linda at Kaiser Permanente, you know, we were in charge of all the management and leadership training at Kaiser Sunset Medical Center. 3,000 employees, doctors, physicians, nurses, food service, medical records. It's like a whole city, Kaiser, Los Angeles, Sunset. And one of the things that you learn is about the importance of, when it comes to managing people and working with people, the number one thing that people look for is, can I trust you? Can I trust you? Are you trustworthy? The second thing they look for when it comes to employment and management leadership is, are you competent? But trust is more important than competence. I mean, they're both important, trust me. And I kind of liken it a bit to a board game that was really popular when I was a kid, and it's still popular even now as an adult. And that board game is called Risk, R-I-S-K. Any of you here have ever played Risk? Some of you have? Okay. You know, I remember playing it, actually watching my big brothers play it, who are older than me, number one, number two, number three. One of my big brothers would invite his friends, and they would play board games. He would make sandwiches, snacks for them, and you know, but it's a pretty simple game that starts out innocently enough. Basically, Risk has these, you know, you get 4 or 5 players, you know, and each player has a container filled with these plastic pieces. They're all yellow, or this person has his pieces are all red. This person's pieces are all blue. This person's pieces are all black. And those little plastic pieces represent soldiers and armies. And on the board is simply a simplistic map of the world, continents. There's Australia, there's going up into Asia, there's Africa, there's Europe, there's North America, South America, and what it's about is each of those countries is divided up in little pieces. And your goal is to, as you put your pieces and scatter them on the board, is you want to conquer other countries. So you might be in North America, and everyone has their pieces there, and you roll dice, and you try to take over North America. Then you try to take over South America. And it's a simple enough game, but it's vicious. I mean, it's really vicious. Why? Because as you start out, and some people are nice, and you make these partnerships. It's, okay, I won't attack you if you don't attack me. It's how it always starts out. We'll be friends, so, okay, I'll let you have South America if you let me have North. So you make these little unwritten truces or partnerships. But ultimately, you're set to fail. Why? Because the goal of the game is world domination. So you make a truce, but eventually at some point, someone's got to say or do is attack the other person and break that truce. And then the emotions fly out. You promised me you wouldn't attack me, and da-da-da-da-da, right? And so you violate that trust. I remember I did that to my little brother. And for years, he did not forgive me. He was so angry at me. He wouldn't forget that you violated our truce, right? But think of Joseph. Joseph, brothers, it wasn't a game. They literally sold him off to slavery, right? It wasn't like getting mad at your brother and you know, you hit him on the head with a pot when he's sleeping. I did that, okay? And I've done worse things to my brothers, and they've done worse things to me, you know, brothers. But Joseph's brothers had violated him in the most evil of ways. I want to share a quote from you from a book called Healing for Damaged Emotions that says that the two primary causes of emotional stress are the failure to forgive and the failure to receive forgiveness. Again, right? The two primary causes of emotional stress are failure to forgive and the failure to receive forgiveness. Joseph shows incredible grace, mercy, forgiveness, love as he forgives his brothers. He says in verse 3, unable to control himself, he says, I am Joseph. His brothers are in shock. They're scared. They're fearful. They're like, he's alive. Is he going to kill us, right? Because that's a natural reaction. Is he going to get his revenge on us, right? And Joseph responds in the most beautiful of ways. I mean, this speaks of his faith in God. This speaks of just his trust and obedience. He says in verse 8, in Genesis 45, verse 8, I'm going to back up just a bit. Verse 7, he says, God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant in the earth and keep you alive by a great deliverance. Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his household and ruler over all the land of Egypt. I mean, Joseph takes the amazing biblical view, right? He looks at, his eyes are on God. His faith is in God. He says, it was not you who sent me here. That God was over all. It was his plan, his purpose for me to be here, right? And I want to look very carefully at verse 9, at the words that Joseph chooses. He says, hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You know, Joseph doesn't say, I'm the big boss. I'm Lord of Egypt. I'm all powerful. He says, no, he says, God has made me Lord of Egypt. He gives glory to God. You know, it's amazing the tests that we go through as we age, as we get in positions of influence, of authority. You know, there's 3 tests. I remember this from my Bible college days, right? The test of pride, of lust, and power. And Joseph passes all 3 of those tests, right? The test of lust, when Potiphar's wife threw herself at him. You know, the test of lust, when Joseph takes just one wife, when he could have multiple, right? Given his position of influence. The test of power, Joseph's second in command. And he shows incredible humility. He gives thanks to God. The test of pride, right? God put me in this position. You know, I've seen people fail the test of power. People who get put in the position of influence for the first time, and they want to wave that, you know, that manager supervisor card, right? Or be the tyrant, be the dictator. Because I'm in control, you have to do what I tell you to do. I've seen it, adults at my age fail that test badly when they're put in positions, again, of influence or power. And you see it in little ways. We had this one speaker at Rotary a couple of years ago, and I was asked to MC that service. And our Rotary meetings are like church. We sing a couple of songs, we have announcements, and there's a speaker. And this speaker was talking, he was a college professor and an author. And he wrote about the LA Dodgers. And so someone thought it would be cute to have me being a diehard Giants fan, be the MC that day. I'm not. This is true. So they said, "Oh, that's going to be fun. Have Kim be the MC. He's a Giants guy, and he's going to have to introduce the Dodger guy, and so forth." Well, the speaker, are always given instructions. They're given instructions of where to park the car that day, right? Instructions on how long to speak. Instructions on if they have a PowerPoint slide, bring your thumb drive. As I'm having lunch with this gentleman, I tell him, you've got the instructions, we're going to introduce you, give you the microphone, and as you speak, I'm going to give you a 5-minute warning. So I'm just going to hold my hand up like this, wrap it up. And so, I'm sitting at the table, he's in front, and he's going, and I do this, like the 5-minute warning. He blows right past it. I mean, just blows right past it. And I'm thinking, okay, he's one of those long-winded college professors. So I have to give him another hint. So what do? I get out of my chair, and I stand behind him. He ignores me, keeps on talking. And so I say to him, we need you to wrap up in the next minute. Blows right by me, keeps on talking. I pull his jacket like this. Because one of my mentors, who was the president of the club, says, sometimes that's what you have to do with the speaker. Give their jacket, and you're behind the lectern, this is a lectern, and they can't see you pull his jacket, but he'll feel it. I did it 2 times, and he kept on talking. This guy was like, you know what? I'm in the limelight, defeating my ego. I have 100 people in this room. They got to listen to me. They're a captive audience. They're held hostage. Finally, I had to take the mic away from him and say, thank you for sharing today, because he would just not let go. My goodness, right? And that's what happens sometimes with people when you give them authority or control or the limelight. It just gets to their head. My goodness. But with Joseph, it was not an issue. Not an issue. Because he had a heart for God. We're told that when he saw his brothers, there was tears and embracing. That he hugged his brothers. That he cried, right? He told them, you don't have to fear. We're told that the brothers, in one verse, it simply says that brothers talked to Joseph. I can imagine the words they had for Joseph. I'm sorry, I apologize. Please forgive me. And Joseph's like, you've been forgiven. And we're told that with all this commotion and emotion, the Egyptians, Pharaoh and his court, the leadership within the Egyptians, they're like, what's going on, right? Like, what's going on with Joseph? And we read in chapter 45, verse 16, now when the news was heard in Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brothers had come, it pleased Pharaoh and Pharaoh's servants. That says something incredibly powerful, that Joseph's testimony, because of his faithfulness, how he carried himself, his humility, that he didn't let it get to his head, right? He had Pharaoh's absolute favor and trust. Joseph was a blessing to Egypt. They're 2 years into the famine. All these other countries are starving. And Egypt's they're shining, right? I mean, and Joseph's a good guy. He's trustworthy. He's second in command. He's not a threat to me. And Pharaoh's like, my goodness, this guy, he is blessed of God. And being good to Joseph and his family, it's a good thing, because he's blessed all the country of Egypt. And so what I want to close with is that power, wealth, birth order, being the oldest, being the youngest, it means nothing. It means nothing. Being the richest means nothing. Being, influence, what matters is your faith and obedience to God. We're told that faith without works is dead. Faith requires obedience. It requires us to be faithful with all that God has given us. When you have a deep faith in God, it blesses your family. And that translates into managing your household. I love the passage when Joshua says, "But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." When you are faithful and obedient to God, it means submitting to God. It means forgiving others. It means not having grudges. So when you have been hurt, you forgive. You show grace. You show kindness. You leave it at the cross. You know, when you have been blessed, you bless others. And Joseph, you know, and Pharaoh says, bring all your family here to Egypt. We're going to take care of them. Bring all your brothers. Bring all their households, right? We're talking hundreds, thousands of people. Bring them all here. And we're going to give you the best of the land to take care of your people. The blessing of God that comes from using Joseph as our example.
Yeah, I need to do more, but I tried. A friend of mine gave me a guitar I have at home now as well. So I can practice. I leave it here because it's a pain to bring it back and forth. But